So today I wanted to take a closer look at one specific character within The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Now this game is filled with many interesting characters from start to finish. Each one of them has their very own unique quirks and personalities. But let's go back to the very beginning, where we come across the very first companion that stuck with Link all the way across his entire adventure. And yes, I'm talking about none other than Navi the Fairy. And I'm pretty sure I pronounced that correctly, Navi, right? Because I went most of my gaming life calling her Navy. Anyways, Navi is one of the most controversial characters within the Zelda franchise. And not in the sense that many players at the time did sort of found her annoying. I mean, I really didn't find it all that annoying, but even so, she got to witness the story of the hero of time firsthand. I mean, she got to watch the legend play out right in front of her, making her a really important character within the Zelda franchise. So why is she such a controversial character, you may ask? Well, let me explain. You see, once Link is successfully saved Hyrule from the clutches of darkness that were brought upon by the Gerudo King Ganondorf himself, Link is then returned to the Altar of Time by Princess Zelda. And here he is sent back in time to the events before he pulled out the Master Sword. But what we weren't expecting though was that our friend Navi was going to say her final goodbye to our hero here. And you see, this is the part where the controversy hits, and by that I mean every single Zelda fan in existence, including myself. Now the thing is, no one really knows where Navi took off to. It was such a sudden goodbye that Navi never mentioned that she was going to be departing or leaving our hero behind. And leaving the fans behind with a number of unanswered questions. Questions like, where did she go and why did she leave, and etc. It was such a random event that most fans were not expecting after beating the game. But as more Zelda games continue to release, one after another, we've heard legends of the previous hero of time and his trusty companion Navi. But those legends never explain on Navi's departure. Surely Navi should still exist somewhere, right? If we take a look at the fairy hierarchy within The Legend of Zelda, fairies are able to grow between different stages of life. There are normal fairies, healing fairies, guardian fairies, and of course we have the high-level ones, such as great fairies and even the Queen of Fairies herself. There are also others known as spirits and sprites, but that's a lot more info we need just for this video. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea on how the whole fairy lineage thing works out. So anyways, do you guys know in which category Navi falls into? Well, it should be quite obvious. Navi falls into the guardian type of fairy. Well, now that I'm on the subject, every single fairy found within the Kokiri forest is also considered guardians as well. These are distributed by the Great Deku Tree himself to keep watch over the Kokiri children, so they're technically fulfilling their role as guardians. So with knowing all of this, just what kinds of plans were made for Navi? We know that Link was not a Kokiri but a Hylian child. The game does make it sound within its narrative that the Kokiri are only able to find a fairy partner, which is the reason why Link has gone so long without one. But as it turns out, that wasn't the case at all. As we all know, the Great Deku Tree already had other plans for Link and a specific fairy named Navi. So in the intro of the game, the Great Deku Tree has already set things into motion, because like we all knew, his time was starting to run short, thanks to the curse that the Gerudo King Ganondorf has placed on him. Now, the Great Deku Tree knew just how important Link was for the future of Hyrule, and tasked Navi to stay by his side to help him reach those goals. But now what happens once Link is done saving Hyrule? Was there any reason for Navi to stay by Link's side? Is that the reason why she suddenly left? Well, I personally think Navi was perhaps tasked to do something else. Or maybe she was already ready to evolve into her next stage of her fairy life. She was a guardian fairy after all, and she succeeded in what the Great Deku Tree asked her to do. So does this mean that Navi was not ready to become a great fairy? Okay, so I went on a whole rant about Navi's backstory a bit, but let's try to get to the point of this theory already. So we know that Navi departed within the Temple of Time. She flew upwards towards the glass window that is seen on top of the temple itself. But that wouldn't make any sense. Why would she fly into the window? There really isn't anything there. Or so we first thought. She could have flown anywhere in Hyrule if she wanted to, but where exactly still remains a mystery. Anyways, I'm gonna switch over to another game so this theory can make more sense. But we're gonna switch over to Twilight Princess. Now in this game, the Temple of Time makes another appearance once again. Though this time around, it's actually considered an actual dungeon, where our hero of the Twilight has to venture through it. And we've never seen the Temple of Time ever looked like this in any Zelda game before, which kinda makes me believe that there is more to the Temple of Time than just that building itself. There must be some sort of portal here within the Temple of Time that seems to connect to different areas, or maybe different points in time. Anyways, our hero of the Twilight ventures through this temple and he finally makes his way to a familiar corridor. And as you can see, this place is the same altar room where the hero of time once stood, with the same pedestal he used to travel between time, but this time around, our hero of the Twilight uses the Master Sword with a different function, as when he places the Master Sword back to its pedestal, a hidden set of stairs can be seen materializing and showing us a hidden pathway. Now these stairs lead towards a hidden pathway that was hidden behind the decorative glass. This leads to another portion of the Temple of Time. Now before I can go even further, I want to point out that this hidden pathway is actually the very same place where Navi departed into. And remember how I said that there's more to the Temple of Time? Maybe she traveled further within the temple itself. Or maybe it was a portal to a different time period. And from what we just witnessed Twilight Link do, it's safe to assume that maybe Navi ventured in further and remained within the Temple of Time. So what if Navi remained inside the temple after all this time? And if that's the case, we would for sure heard some sort of mention of her within Twilight Princess. And yet, we don't get the slightest clue as to where she is. Which is quite strange because the hero of time himself is actually present here in Twilight Princess, though he is known as the hero's shade. So we know what became of the hero of time, and yet nothing about Navi? Well, what if I said that maybe we did meet Navi in Twilight Princess, and we were just unaware that it was her the entire time we came into contact with her? Because you see, I think Navi would have been a great fairy around this time now. I don't think she's no longer a guardian fairy, that's for sure, and if you think about it, there is only one great fairy present within the overworld of Twilight Princess. And yes, I'm talking about none other than the Great Fairy that is located within the Cave of Ordeals. And I think this Great Fairy might be none other than Navi herself, because it kinda makes sense that Navi would end up here after the events of Ocarina of Time, since her role as a guardian fairy was already over. She now had to take on her new role as a Great Fairy in order to help out the heroes to come. And once you're able to clear the entire Cave of Ordeals, she will gift you a Great Fairy Tears. Now she also mentions that you can get into contact with her within any of the fairy springs located all across Hyrule. And upon visiting any of these springs, her presence can be seen hovering over these springs as well. Considering how she is the only great fairy found there, of course, I wonder if she was the basis for the many more great fairies to come. Now when you run out of fairy tears, you can return back to any of these lakes and get a refill from the great fairy herself. But in doing so, she will actually transport you back into the Cave of Ordeals, where she will gift you an endless supply of fairy tears, which I guess comes in handy. So anyways, do you guys think that this topless of a beauty of a fairy is actually Navi from Ocarina of Time? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Now these fairy springs have survived the test of time, considering how we can still find them in Breath of the Wild. Now this time around, each of them has their very own great fairy looking over it. Even though they aren't at full power, thanks to the diminishing effect of the calamity that took place prior 100 years ago, it left them in a pretty weakened state, though it doesn't take our hero of the wilds too long to restore them to their full power. Now there is only one small detail worth mentioning in Breath of the Wild regarding any connection to Navi, and that is that there are 3 lakes that are found within the Dueling Peaks area called the 3 Navi Lakes. Now sure, the pronunciation is quite different, but this is actually how Navi's name is pronounced within the Japanese language. So yes, these are indeed 3 lakes that are named after Navi herself. Though that's pretty much any kind of correlation or connection we're gonna make from this. I mean, this could just be an Easter egg or a callback to Zelda's most memorable characters. Who knows, but it sure is interesting. So what did you guys think about this theory? Do you really think Navi has not become a great fairy? And if so, could she be the great fairy found within the Cave of Ordeals? Well, do make sure to let me know in the comments, and with that, I thank you guys for your time, and I'll see you guys on the next one.